Solemn Eid prayers will mark the end of the month-long Ramadan period. In Mombasa, faithful congregated at the historical Tononoka grounds. And whereas messages of peace, love and unity came in plenty, the scope of discussion will however stretch miles away into the heart of what has been described as the world's most controversial conflict, the Israeli-Palestinian war, a discussion that trails the immediate departure of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Mfumo wao wa kisiasa ni mfumo ambao ulikuwa declared na United Nations kuwa ni aina ya ubaguzi. Leo iwe ina uhusiano mzuri na nchi za Kiafrika, hatujui tuenda wapi.
For decades, the ripple effects of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has caught the world's attention, and these leaders have a problem with Kenya making close association with Israel, which they believe is persecuting Palestinian Arab nation over deeply embedded historical land conflicts.
This is not anything that is about anti-Jews, but it is anti-Israel and anti-Zionism.
Though both Jews and Arab Muslims did their claims to the land that the sites occupy a couple thousand years, the current political conflict began in the early 20th century.
Everybody is agreed that Zionism is a form of racism.
Yes.
So if Zionism is a form of racism, then the Zionist regime is a racist regime. In the same way we fought the apartheid, then Zionism must be fought to that extent where it goes against the grain of international basic rights.
Zionists believe Judaism is a nationality as well as a religion, and that the Jews deserve their own state, something that is at the core of what concerns Arabs and Palestinians about the Israeli state.
Na tuachelea isije hili likaonekana ya kuwa nchi yetu sasa imejiunga na nchi hizi ambazo zafanya dhulma waziwazi na mauaji waziwazi. Tayari hivi sasa kuna malalamiko.
Some critics reckon that the United States of America, which holds UN veto power, has not shown a considerate and deliberate commitment to ending the Israeli-Palestinian crisis. Francis Ontomwa, KTN News, Mombasa.
Good evening and thank you so much for joining us on The Last Word tonight. Francis Ontomwa kicking off our show today that focuses largely on matters religion, and today also focusing on religion and conflict as well. There's a conference that's ongoing on the same subject. It opened on Monday, goes through to the 8th of this month. And on a Twitter poll question, we're interacting and engaging with you. We want to hear your thoughts on this subject. Do you think religion has funded insecurity, is fueling insecurity, not only here in Kenya, but around the globe? We've seen of incidences where religious groups come and under the spotlight, and that's what we want to canvass. And joining me in studio on my extreme right is Professor Esther Mombo. She's a former Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic Affairs at St. Paul's University. She has a PhD in Church History from University of Edinburgh, and is presently Director International Partnerships and Alumni Relations at St. Paul's University. Of course, also with us next to me is Dr. Joseph Wandera, who's a senior lecturer in the Department of Religious Studies at St. Paul's University and the coordinator of the Center for Christian-Muslim Relations in ISLI, with a PhD in Religious Studies, examined public preaching among Muslims and Pentecostals in Mumias, Western Kenya, and its influence on interfaith relations. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. So a conference on religion and faith, religion and insecurity, so faith and how those two interact. Let's begin with you, Professor Mombo. What informed this conference?
The conference that is held this week at Jumuiya near St. Paul's University is informed by the current realities both in our country and in the continent and also in the world, where, as you've pointed out earlier, that there are a number of conflicts that are going on, and some of them appear to be inclined to using religion in fueling those conflicts. The conference is not there to look at religion per se, but is how religion is used in cases of conflict and how religion can also be a source of ending some of those conflicts.
All right, so you're approaching it from a point of ending. Is there room, and are you also exploring those who may raise concerns that religion can also play of causing that very same conflict you're talking about?
Well, thank you, Sophie. The relationship between religion and conflict is rather paradoxical in the sense that in religion are resources for conflict resolution, are teachings that encourage peace and cohesion and friendship and love and forgiveness. And yet within religion, one may argue that are also seeds that, if utilized in a bad way, can enhance conflicts. Texts that can be misinterpreted, religious leaders whose ideologies can mobilize people towards conflict, and the whole question of religion and power, how religious leaders may use their positions basically for political reasons. So my argument is that it is a very paradoxical relationship. Religion both as a source of conflict, of course its utilization, its embodiment, but also religion as having very fertile resources for enhancing cohesion.
All right. And Professor, in as far as the Kenyan situation, let's begin at home. Where are the areas of concern that, yes, of course, there's a lot of developments around the world in as far as this subject is concerned, but here in Kenya, help reconcile for our viewers tonight why this is an important subject of conversation in as far as some of the things we've seen happen in the past.
The topic of the conference is very important for us in this country because while both faiths, Islam and Christianity, have had relatively peaceful coexistence with each other from history, but the current realities appear to be those in which we see aspects of conflict, and sometimes these aspects of conflict appear to be to use religion. Religion is pointed at because some of the people who are engaged in the conflict also are people who profess a faith. And sometimes it's difficult to separate the two. So within this country, therefore, it is important to look at how we can live with each other peacefully by using the positive aspects within religion that my colleague has mentioned, the resources that are within the religion to ensure that people are able to separate that which fuels conflict and not just to use religion as a source of conflict.
All right, although I still need to hear, if you may, real examples that have perhaps happened that should, point perhaps a finger or point to the direction of, in this particular case, these are some of the tensions, Dr. Ari, perhaps you could join in, that we saw arise, and hence, pointing and having focus on this kind of, because yes, you talk about the kind of tensions that would come up from affiliations of individuals to certain religions and them professing, but in as far as real events that we've seen occur, do we have any that we can cite?
Yes, of course, Sophie, there are numerous events in the recent history of this country that seem to point to the role of religion in conflict. I think the most prominent one in the last few years, the Westgate attack. Much earlier, the bombing of the US Embassy, the incident in Mandera where there was an attack on passengers in a bus, and in that particular incident, we were able to see how religion actually became a resource for protecting the other. And there have been many other incidences in Italy, the attack on a matatu. We are not saying that these really are religious players. However, there's a sense in which religion and identity comes into place, that those people who carry out some of these acts actually do make claim of religious identity, that we are doing what we have done on the basis of the fact that we subscribe to a particular religious tradition.
All right. And that some would have a problem with, because then that means that the church, and in this case in holding this conference, that you are choosing to respond to these individuals who choose to link their acts, their terrorism acts, to religion. Because you look at, for example, the United States, they have made, under President Obama's leadership, a conscious decision not to use the word Islam in as far as talking about terrorism. So they have completely delinked, at least in their rhetoric and their approach as government, terrorism and religion. But in this, I'm hearing us tying in, religion and terrorism. And in essence, then we're letting the culprits and these individuals who want to tie those in carry the day, and we are following that agenda. Do you see merit in that argument?
Not really, because the fact that we want to create a space of discussing that is not following or being bought into the agenda of those that claim that because they are members of this religion and they are using certain texts to act the way they act. That is not our agenda. Our agenda is actually to look further than what they are saying and ask ourselves, why are they doing what they are doing, and why are they using religion, or why are they claiming that their religion supports them? Because we do know that even within that, there are those who come up and say, this is not our religion. And we are saying, if this is not the religion, then why is it some individuals are carrying out these acts and associating themselves to this particular religion, which actually says, no, that is not our faith, that is not our practice. So with creating this space, therefore, we are seeing that there are other underlying factors, not necessarily religious factors, but religion becomes a softer spot for talking about, partly because religion then becomes emotive, then religion becomes sometimes a scapegoat for some of those aspects that are not being dealt with.
So what then do you think about, for example, the Obama administration's approach saying we're not going to refer to terrorists as Islamic group or this or the other, because that is in essence roping in religion, and they want to draw a clear distinction between religion and people who terrorize others, whether they subscribe to Islam, to whatever, Buddhism, to Christianity?
There's legitimacy in that kind of approach to incidents of terror, to delink a particular religious tradition from acts of, inhuman acts of terror. And I think that is precisely what the conference is trying to do, to put the realities on the table and to give participants and practitioners a position to interrogate much more deeply what exactly is happening. If we are saying that Christianity, for example, has certain texts within the Bible that are problematic, how might these texts be misused by people to construct the other negatively? So the conference really is not trying to create a divide between this and the other. It is creating a platform for members of the two religious traditions, scholars who are committed to studying the two religious traditions, to interrogate them closely and see what in them can be misused and what in them can be used to enhance peace. So the agenda of trying to delink, trying to avoid blanketing, a particular religious tradition is legitimate in that sense, because then what you avoid is is really profiling a particular religious group.
And largely in the past, when we have seen these kind of conversations come up, concern has been largely that it is profiling that happens to those that subscribe to the Muslim faith, the Islamic faith. And when you're bringing in Christianity and other faiths, break it down for us in as far as how that then can be abused.
I think in terms of looking at abuse can take place in regard to how people use power, for example. And within religion, there is the misuse of power. Within religion, there is overuse of power, but there is also within the different religious traditions a way in which power is to affirm and power is to enhance, and rather than be a space of abuse. So within this conference, therefore, it's a space to try and open up such difficult topics like power. How do you talk about power? Who has power? And how is power used? Both by the leaders of the different religious tradition, but also by the practitioners of that particular religion. So an aspect of power is one that one cannot argue that it is straightforward, is complex. And that's why within this conference, therefore, we try to put to the fore the complexities that we see within the religious traditions, but also in the context of conflict, that you cannot say it is yellow and green. It is much more complex than that, as my colleague began by talking about it being a paradoxical space. And I think for this conference, therefore, what we are trying to bring to the fore is to say it is not an aspect that can be dealt with easily. It is an aspect that one has to realize the complexities of it and be able to untie the knots and say you cannot use, for example, texts to fuel conflicts. But within these texts, they may be difficult, but within the text, you can also find solutions for the conflicts.
And who are the players that you're engaging, the groups in terms of interreligious alliances that you're seeking to have this conversation with you at the conference?
The various groups who are participating in this conference, Sophie, as a matter of fact, tomorrow at around 10:30, Ambassador Kimani, who is the director of the National Counter-Terrorism Agency in the Republic, is going to to present a paper. But we are also engaging with religious leaders, so practitioners, because we cannot, as academics, just talk among ourselves. We must engage with the purveyors, the peddlers of religion, if I may put it that way. We have brought together 20 youth from different parts of the country to also participate in this conversation, because we are aware that acts of terror deploy young people. They make use of young people to carry out some of these acts. We have members of the diplomatic community. The conference was opened by His Excellency, the Canadian High Commissioner to Kenya, and the MP for Kamkunji, Honorable Yusuf Hassan. So really, and academics, of course, from different countries, locally, but also internationally. So it's a whole range of actors that we are seeking to engage with in this conference, because we do realize that it's a huge challenge that needs concerted efforts that is multi-sectoral.
And you talk about young people and the position they find themselves in. They are more vulnerable, they're impressionable, and some of them, it's the challenges they face that perhaps put them in that state of vulnerability. So when we link that with radicalization, are you exploring that? And as religious groups, then how do you come in, and scholars as well, in as far as your engagement to figure a way in which that can be stopped or at least slowed down, because it has been happening here in the country as well?
Within the conference, and as you point out, young people are vulnerable. They are gullible, they are vulnerable, and until they are listened to, I think we will not go forward. Hence, us having them in this conference. And one, giving them space to voice up some of the challenges they face as young people. And listening to them, particularly today, as they engage with scholars, because sometimes in terms of scholarship, you can be very abstract. But as they push the scholars to think through the realities that they face, and some of them would bring to the fore why they would be lured to go and be involved in acts of terrorism. And the narrative some of them bring to the fore are challenges within their own space of unemployment, of poverty, of having received an education, and there is no space to use even some of the skills that they have learned.
Okay.
The fact that they are able to speak that, and they are speaking it to power, is like bringing to the fore that you are not hearing us. You can be talking about terrorism, but you really don't understand what we are going through. And within this conference, they have been given the space to question, to challenge. But at the same time, it is a space in which they do understand how the different religious traditions are interrogated. A space that is not one where you are just told this is what you are supposed to do and then you follow it, but a space where they can question. They can say, why is this the way it is? And that space is a healthy space because they are not intimidated. It's a healthy space because it's one that helps them to understand. It's one that really empowers them. And throughout this conference, what we've seen is that dialogue with academics, with religious leaders, and with themselves.
So you have youth that had initially been radicalized, perhaps now going through de-radicalization, or the same has happened, being part of this forum?
I wouldn't say that we have youths who have or have not, but we've picked youths from different parts of the country, places where there has been conflict, and we've picked youths, both men and women. We have youths from both religious traditions. We haven't profiled them to know whether they have been or they've not. But we do know that the information they have is information that represents the voices of many of the youths in their communities.
Right. And Doctor, still on that point of radicalization, what then do you see as the role that must be taken up by especially religious groups, especially in times of teaching, because these young people interact with this material? Is it that there's a loophole in perhaps the teachers not understanding the content, and so what they're passing on in itself is causing misinterpretation, or there are those rogue elements in the church that are actually passing on this very radical and extreme elements of the different groups of religion?
Yes, thank you. Religious leaders have a critical role to play in this whole process of fighting against terror. And as you rightly indicate, one of their roles is really teaching. Let me give an example. There are texts on social media, on YouTube, that are portrayed in such a manner that they enhance incidents of terror. Now, in such a liberalized media space, it's extremely important that religious leaders play a role in countering this kind of messages. But beyond countering these messages, religious leaders also have a role in terms of mentorship. You know, some of the young people who fall prey to radicalization simply lack mentorship. We are living in a society that is very individualized. It's a society where nobody cares about the other, and religious leaders, religious institutions have a critical role in terms of providing space for proper mentorship. It is not that they themselves would do it, but it is them creating space where young people can be connected to proper role models. Religious institutions, religious leaders have huge networks, and indeed they can actually play a role even in advising government agencies, in advising non-state actors on certain trends that might contribute to incidents of terror, because they are on the ground, they are with the people, they are among the communities. So I see the role of religious leaders in this whole fight against terror as extremely, extremely huge, and one that is yet to be exploited. I think talking about security issues, we are used to hearing about the police, we are used to hearing about guns, we are used to hearing about helicopters, but you hardly hear a serious engagement with religious leaders. And so what this forum seeks to do, partly, is to say, look, religious actors do have an important role in this whole process of fighting in insecurity, that they can be allies in this fight.
Right. All right, and you're watching The Last Word here on KTN News, discussing insecurity and religion. Stay with us. After the break, ladies and gentlemen, I also want us to explore the media and how it depicts some of the challenges that are faced in as far as this dynamic and conversation we're having today, because there are those who criticize the media and say that perhaps it is sometimes on the opposite side of helping this conversation. Stay with us. We're back shortly.
Mine is unmatched content on issues that matter to you in unmatched style. Now in London, that yellow box means a lot. Behavior and congestion in the city, out of the ordinary. Morning, habari. Namna gani? Tuelekea town sasa. Exclusive. Je m'appelle Alex.
Je m'appelle Kofi.
Je suis journaliste, mais je parle un peu de français seulement. To the point.
Let us look at the personality of the person, not the tribe, because that is what is in our country.
Told through first-hand experience. I'm called Alex Chamada, and you? Yes. Yeah, there he goes in his car. He's just stopped to say hi to me. From every corner of the world. Hello, I'm Alex Chamada in Paris. President Uhuru Kenyatta visited some of the greenhouses here in Israel, and that's changing the guard. Right from here at the Buckingham Palace, told through state-of-the-art presentation. I visited Norway recently, where they are advanced in recycling.
This biogas is used on our buses in this region.
With you in mind. Join me for the Chamada Report every Sunday at 8:30 p.m. only on KTN News.
Masomo ni ufunguo wa maisha. Sekta zote za uchumi zategemea elimu. Kuanzia chekechea hadi elimu ya juu, Kenya imejitahidi japo vizingiti havikosekani.
Students don't set exams. They don't distribute exams.
Migomo ya walimu imekuwa jambo la kawaida nchini. Wizi wa mitihani nao umegeuzwa desturi miongoni mwa watahiniwa na walimu.
We are cancelling the results of 5,101 candidates.
Mfumo wa elimu ya 844 unafanyiwa mabadiliko.
The 844 system is not the problem. The problem is the content.
Na viongozi wa kesho wanatarajiwa kutoka kwenye mchakato huo wa elimu. Elimu imeingiwa doa.
Whose chairman is he?
Tatizo liko wapi?
Democracy must be respected. Let those leaders come, we work together.
Lugha ya Kiswahili inapuuzwa au haipuuzwi?
Sasa sijajua kama Kiswahili kina kabla mara mbili. Si lazima uende shule ndio ujue hiyo lugha. Kama ninaharibu siwezi kujua.
Yote haya ni mambo na vijimambo kwenye sekta ya elimu.
Who is the chair lady of Teacher Service Commission?
Kama watakuwa hawajalipa hiyo pesa, walimu hawatafungua shule.
Ni idadi ambayo inatisha sana, na hivyo basi baraza la mitihani nchini sasa kurunzi yetu inaimulika kila Jumamosi saa 10:30 jioni kwenye kipindi cha Dau la Elimu.
Mikasa na visa halisi wakati ya kale yamekataa kuondoka moyoni.
Akaanza kuniambia sasa kulingana na mila yao lazima apate bibi wa kwao.
Sio kitendo ya binadamu.
Hivyo ndio kunaendaga.
Kukiri, hukumu na majuto.
Sina nguvu za kiume mpaka wa leo.
Sasa ile mambo ya kitanda hakuna.
When aliona pass kwa bra, he changed his mind. He said he doesn't want to sleep with me.
Ni shida kupata msichana wa kuaminika ambaye anaweza kwenda nyumbani. Wako wengi wa kulala nao.
Yote yaliyo sirini kuwe kwa wazi.
I became an escort to pay my school fees.
But vile nilimaliza shule, nikakosa kazi nini, kabidi nianze sex work.
Shiko ni kahaba.
Wacha nikwambie dad, kwanza ndio the first profession, oldest profession, sex work.
Sijasema hivyo. Sijasema kwamba wala sijakuhukumu.
Ni safari ya maisha inayotulazimu kuishi na vimbwanga.
Hii ni ya mama ama ni ya mwanamke hizi?
Why are you cheating? You are principal. You are principal.
Kila Jumamosi jioni kwa uwazi, kwa kina, ni kimasomaso.
Here on KTN News, thank you so much for staying with us. Our focus tonight is religion and insecurity, and still quite a lot to discuss in this half of the show. But remember to also participate, share your thoughts with us. Tonight, we'd like to hear your thoughts, even as you hear what our guests are saying on the various subjects we're conversing tonight. Tweet me at Sophia Wanuna. I'll read some of your tweets towards the end of the show. Prof, let me ask you this. How then would you say religion, in terms of playing a role in insecurity, how significant is that, especially in Kenya? Is it a big concern?
I want to say that yes, it is a big concern, because when you think of our society, religion plays a big part in terms of when you think of how people appropriate a religion, how people attend, whether it is mosques or churches, that in terms of numbers, you see many of the people going in to worship. And so it is one of those aspects that is part and parcel of society. And as part and parcel of society, therefore, when there is insecurity, of course, then people question how come that if these are people who are practicing this faith, a faith that professes peace and love and sharing, how then do we then have situations of conflict? And that then raises question, is it religion? Is it the type of religion? Is it the people? Or what is wrong with the religious teaching, or is it the way that it is taught? And that is why it raises concern in a largely a situation where people profess a particular faith, but at the same time there are things that appear not to enhance or affirm life, but the things that are there, those that destroy life. So yes, it becomes a question. It becomes a real concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before we went to break, I'd mentioned, Doctor, about the media. Do you find that in as far as this conversation is concerned and the challenges that come up, the media is playing a role that is helping or not quite?
I think both. The media does play an important role in terms of informing the public about incidents of insecurity and about efforts that are being undertaken to secure people, to secure property, to secure lives. But on the other hand, I would argue that media can and indeed in the past has played into the hands of terrorists. Let me give an example. I do recall during the Westgate attack, Kenyans being shown pictures of terrorists, reportedly praying, and these being beamed to the world. Now, what effect does that kind of reporting have? It's basically religious profiling. Because the common mwananchi may not actually understand that the person who is doing that in his or her own capacity, and that is not what a particular religious tradition stands for. Now, I would argue that in such a case, the better way would have been for media to simply shut that person out of the public view, so that we do not play into the agenda. Right. Because what Al-Shabaab, what Al-Qaeda, what ISIS is looking for is limelight, basically. And sometimes I think media has offered these groups an undue limelight. These groups flourish on media. We do know, for example, that Al-Shabaab have, I think, it's a magazine called Gaidi Mutaani, in which they would report what they have done, and the public would be able to access that text and to read it. We do know that they put their messages on YouTube and so forth and so on. So I think that in the fight against terror, against insecurity, media has an important role in terms of informing, but media also have to be careful about how they do it, so that they do not unwittingly enhance the terror agenda.
Yeah. All right. And Prof, do you think we have seen in the past police crackdowns on a section of religious groups that are allegedly linked to terrorist activities? Do you think those crackdowns are justified? Because in some cases we've seen the police come under a lot of criticism in the manner in which they conduct them.
I think the situation is complex, and I think every crime should be followed, and those that are involved in criminal acts should be brought to book. But sometimes if a crime has happened and a particular space is targeted, it just falls into the stereotypes that are there about the different communities. So I think the police have a role to play in terms of looking for criminals and arresting them, but not in blanket terms where everybody who is in a particular space or is of a particular identity is assumed to be part and parcel the criminal acts.
The criminal acts. I want to, at this point, just sample some of the views we're getting in tonight. A question on Twitter: has religion fund insecurity more than helping the situation? Edward Shai, you say, I think the book, The End of Faith, by Sam Harris offers the answers most, if not all. Marutit Kemboy, you're saying yes, by preaching intolerance against anyone who doesn't profess the doctrine, seeing oneself as lesser evil. And then we have Kenny W. You're saying that religion of peace is 100% responsible for terror. Okay. And then we have Mutana. You tweet, justice should prevail. Otherwise, it will be business as usual when we start linking issues to religion. And then we have Obiero. You're saying, I don't understand how Christianity and terrorism is linked. Then there's, let me read one more here. Mark, you say, other than Islam that we see a lot, largely criticized, other religions, how do we see that play out in as far as terrorism is concerned? So that's one of the questions that's being posed. Perhaps you'd want to respond to that, Dr. Hari?
Yes, indeed. Religion in itself is a very abstract term. So when we speak about the relationship between religion and security, I think the better way is to look at the actors, because it is the actors who embody religion. It is the interpreters of texts. It is the teachers in the churches and the madrasas. It is the preachers on Sundays and during the Juma prayers. So I think that insofar as the actors do misuse religion, we can say that the problem is not so much religion, the problem is the actors. It is those who appropriate religion for their own agenda. With respect to the relationship between Christianity and terrorism, I do reckon with the person who has sent that tweet. But if you look at the history of Christianity, is a long topic, and we do not have time to look at it exhaustively. But yes, indeed, there are texts within the Christian tradition. There are texts within the Jewish tradition which have been appropriated over time in such a way to construct the other as the enemy and to destroy the other, to annihilate the other, to take the other's land, and so forth and so on.
Okay.
So in that sense, therefore, there is a link. There has been a link.
Okay. And Prof, earlier we talked about the youth and how you're engaging them in this particular conference, but I understand also women are involved. Talk to us about that, and also the role of the academia, school and learning institutions, how those can play a role.
I think when you look at the way people are formed, the education of people is important, whether it is at the highest level of study or at the kindergarten. So anybody who is involved in education at every level has a role in terms of enhancing the skills of the learners, but also helping the learners to be citizens that can grow themselves and grow society. In terms of higher education, where we are both involved, I think the reasons for institutions of higher education include not only imparting knowledge and skills to the students, but it's also significant in terms of the research that is done, so that that which is offered comes from proper research and innovation within society. But largely, it's also the question of how institutions of higher learning engage themselves within the communities where they are. And looking at those three, therefore, one notes that it's forming a person to be fully engaged within their society in terms of doing good and growing themselves and growing the society. Having said that, therefore, within this conference, we have noted that it is important to bring academia and those that are not in academia together. And let me say, when you talk about women, there is no particular space where women are confined. Women are everywhere within society, whether you are thinking of grassroots or whether you are thinking about academia. There are women within this conference that are also offering their views in terms of faith and insecurity or religion and terrorism. Having said that, it is also important to note that when it comes to leadership and power within the different religious traditions, women appear not to be at the helm of power, but as the receivers at the end of power, because not very many women will be religious leaders with authority in terms of teaching, particularly the text. But that doesn't mean that women are not players on issues of insecurity as far as they are affecting them as a people in society. And so we cannot discuss peaceful coexistence. We can't discuss such relationships and leave the major players or receivers of religion. And I think it's fair to say that when you think of Christianity, for example, if you go to particular denominations, you'll realize that the numbers of women and men vary, but women will be more. But there is also an image that is painted about women and security in terms of seeing them as just receivers. But I think they need to be engaged not just at sympathy level, where they are just seen as mothers or aunts or sisters that we just play upon emotion, but as people who can participate in the decision-making organs of society as far as security is concerned. Because women are maybe affected more when there is insecurity than men, partly because of where they are in society and partly because of how society views them. So in this conference, therefore, they've been brought in not as just listeners, but as participants. So their voices are part and parcel of the voices of others within the academia and within the community.
All right, and as we bring this to a close, Dr. Hari, talk to us about how, so here you are engaging with other stakeholders, and you talked about the counter-terrorist Kimani? Ambassador Kimani, who will be coming to speak. So on one hand, you have the state is coming up with policies every other day, the ministry, interior, and of course other security agencies, equipping the security agencies, the officers. So how do the religious groups engage with state to ensure that it's concerted efforts, all hands are on deck, so that we're all reading from the same script, and really it's, that coming together to ensure that we see the country where we want it to be?
Well, thank you so much. I think the question of insecurity needs a multi-sectoral approach. And that is why the conference is structured in such a way that actors from different institutions get into a conversation. And what we are saying here is that religion does have a critical role to play in this conversation. For example, all religions affirm human dignity. In some cases, responses to terror have appeared to overlook issues of human rights, issues of human dignity. And so religion says, look, you cannot say that you are fighting terror when in fact as state you are terrorizing the very people that you are supposed to be protecting. So what is religion? What are religious actors putting on the table? They are putting on the table the whole question of human dignity, that we are all created, you know, in the image of the ultimate. So in this sense, therefore, the religious actors are not an enemy of the state. They are an ally of the state, but they are also a prophetic voice, so to speak, able to say that yes, we have to engage with this problem, and yet we have to do it with a human face, so that human dignity is upheld. And of course, as I said earlier, religious leaders have huge networks across the country and across the world. They are the only institution that have a captive audience every Sunday, every Friday, and so they do provide a wonderful platform for engaging with societal challenges.
Okay, so our time is up, but I'll allow each of you a minute to give the last word. We'll begin with you, Prof.
Thank you so much for giving us the space to share about this conference that we are passionate about, and the fact that what we try to speak about within this conference is not just ending in the conference. We do look forward to ensuring that some of the things we say and do will be practiced within our society, our community, and the whole essence is the fact that human beings are created to live in dignity, and we need to ensure that that dignity is enshrined in society, so that those things that are not affirming this dignity are the things that we need to do away with, and to ensure that religion is not used to destroy life, but religion is used to affirm life, and that is the essence of religion.
All right, well said. Finally.
Thank you so much. Perhaps viewers will be interested to know where the conference is taking place. It is at St. Paul's University at Jumuiya Conference Center. It's an initiative of the University of St. Paul's, and we do invite everybody to come and attend. It's open to all. And my final word is just to say that in the fight against insecurity, the religious resources are critical in this journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph Wandera and Professor Esther Mwombo with us tonight. And before we go, let me just give you the results of our Twitter poll question, where we were asking you, has religion funded insecurity more than promoted peace? 62% of you think it has. So you say yes. 24% say no, 14% are not sure. That's why we'll wrap up the show tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Sophia Wanuna. On behalf of all those who made the show possible, delighted you made time to be with us. We'll see you again tomorrow night, and Eid al-Fitr to all our Muslim brothers and sisters. God bless.
Thank you very much.